Welcome back to Down the Line, the podcast where we take small moments from today and read them as early signals of tomorrow. My name is Mich and I'm a futurist. Not the sci fi kind, the kind who studies how human behavior, technology, power, and culture shift underneath us long before the headlines catch up. This show is about challenging people and organizations to think better about the future so we can act more intentionally in the present. Every year, as the festive season comes closer, it's natural to do two things at the same time: reflect on the year that's been and consider what the new year may bring. In future studies, we do something similar. We consider our current environment and the trends that brought us here. We look for drivers of change today and think about how they could influence the futures. We don't predict, we engage with uncertainty. We imagine multiple different futures and how to get to our preferred future. Today, I'm thinking about the one thing that most people listening to the show do and how it could change in 2026: the world of work. In this last week, something landed for me. It was just two people, but then I realized I've heard this in one form or another for a while now. I can't lose my job right now. It reminded me that just a couple of years ago, everyone was talking about the great resignation. People quitting in record numbers, walking away from toxic environments and demanding more from work. The trend was more prevalent in the North, but I think we all know someone that went into a different direction in recent years. I'm not talking about van life and becoming an Insta influencer. It had more to do with an alignment of personal values. But it seems people aren't leaving anymore. They're holding on. Some commentators are calling this the great stay. Others call it job hugging. It's signals like this that slowly develop and that we often don't focus on that fascinates me because it says that the world has changed and is likely to continue to do so. So here's the question I want to focus on today. When millions of people can swing from quitting in record numbers to clinging to their jobs in under 3 years, what does that say about how safe, how meaningful, and how human work has really become? Let me take you way back for a moment. I grew up in a time where future advice was straightforward: complete high school, get a degree, work for 40 years, retire. That was it. That was what my father did. That was what his father did before him. They only changed jobs when they were promoted. They never got fired. Restructures and retrenchments didn't exist until they did. In 95, when I was in the final year of high school, my father's job got severely disrupted. He was around the same age than what I am now. He had a master's degree in his pocket and he moved up through the ranks of government, his sole employer to date. And suddenly, he was without a job. While most of South Africa celebrated, our family was faced with uncertainty and fear. Everyone's plans were disrupted, but I still managed to complete step one of mine. I completed high school. Immediately after school, I took on any work available: farm worker, security guard, factory packer, loan shark. At some point, it felt as if I was changing jobs faster than what I was changing underwear. After 5 years of odd jobs, I got the plan back on track and signed up for a 3-year undergraduate qualification. I still had to work to pay the bills, and at some point, I even sold my body in the name of science as a research subject in medical trials. You were thinking something else, eh? Completing the degree was the easy part. Paying for it, a different story. And the random jobs continued, but this time as a migrant worker in the UK, where I once served cucumber sandwiches to the mayor of London at the Queen's Tea Party. When I returned to South Africa, I finally landed the glamorous job that I wanted: pharmaceutical rep. The plan was on track. Now I only had to work hard for 30 years and then retire. In my early days as a rep calling on doctors, I had a book with carbon paper and triplicate copies, which we filled out by hand and both of us signed after a conversation. And then every Monday, first thing, I had to tear out the top two copies, file the one at the office, and the second one, in a pack of 50, feed into the fax machine, dial head office, and then hit send. Sometimes the papers got stuck and I would often lose a page in the fight, and I secretly think that's what the second copy was about. Once completed, I'd stick this into a courier bag and I'd send it off to head office. When it arrived there was a person whose only job it was to capture the information on a spreadsheet. What a job! Can you imagine? I can, because that's what I did in the UK. It sounds crazy now, but we were actually making progress. I had a cell phone, as opposed to just a couple of years earlier when reps walked around with a handful of small change with which to phone the office from phone booths next to the road. Part of that progress was the rise of presenteeism, the first of our buzzwords for this episode. Presenteeism refers to being both visible at work and productive, and it possibly led to early signs that the lines between work and private life was starting to blur. The year 2008 brought big disruption, a global financial crash. Some people lost their entire career's worth of savings in one fell swoop. I was lucky. I didn't have much, and I still had time on my side. But I did take notice. I saw people curb their ambitions, often choosing to stay in safe jobs rather than pursue professional growth. I saw companies starting to lean towards a do more with less and sweat the resource type strategy. We slowly started to see the early signs of people not coping. The mid-2010s brought the mass adoption of the smartphone with emails and SMSs and WhatsApps and CRMs and cloud systems and real-time dashboards, everything on the go. Connectivity exploded, and so did productivity. For corporates, the buzzword was employee engagement, and hustle culture glorified overwork and side hustles, which eventually contributed to the burnout pandemic as recognized by the World Health Organization in 2019. In response, we started hearing talk of work-life balance. People tried to adapt, maybe instead of trying to redesign. The world changed, but we didn't. We just tried to do and be more in response to the pressure. And then COVID hit. Overnight, millions of people worked from home. Many lost loved ones. Many re-evaluated what time, health, and family actually meant. And suddenly, a damn wall broke. In 2021 alone, over 47 million people in the United States resigned from their jobs. We saw similar patterns emerge across Europe and parts of the global south. People walked away from roles they had tolerated for years. This was the Great Resignation. For the first time in decades, Labour had leverage because 47 million resignations meant 47 million vacancies, give or take. Workers wanted flexibility, meaning, and respect. For a while, the rules of work had been rewritten. We saw an explosion of digital nomadism. We saw a surge away from the big cities and rising interest in well-being at work. Some of those that didn't resign engaged with so-called quiet quitting, a boundary-setting response to burnout that went viral on TikTok. In this trend, people were doing their jobs but not going over and above. We heard of things like bare minimum Mondays and act your wage, and this period was also known as the Great Reshuffle. During this period, employees stayed in their jobs, set boundaries, and knew they had options if they wanted to move. Then came the next change. From 2022 until 2024, the world experienced a spike in inflation, followed by interest rate hikes, and tech and other sectors announced large layoffs. At the same time, Gen AI exploded onto the scene, sparking the AI will take my job narratives. Quit rates dropped and commentators began talking about the great stay or job hugging. The difference is that now people are holding tightly onto a job in a market that no longer feels safe to move in. Which brings us to 2025, where 1. Low levels of anxiety and a drop in psychological safety intersects with 2. The large-scale deployment of AI as a co-worker, while raising fears of job redesign and redundancy, and 3. Tension between return to office mandates and employee demands for flexibility. Together with the opposite, 4. Ongoing focus on mental health, 4-day week trials, and right to disconnect laws in some countries. So you can see that tension there. If you zoom out even further, we also see 5. Economic volatility and cost of living pressures. In uncertain economies, security beats meaning. And 6. Geopolitical and climate instability. From climate insecurity to political polarization, there's risk for potential shocks in the medium term. Take all of this together, and organizations respond to increased perceived risk by tightening controls, Households mirror that by tightening their lives. The bottom line? At the surface level, it looks as if people are staying. If you go one level down, you realize people could be scared to leave, not engaged, not developing, not learning new skills, not innovating, not hopeful, just hanging on. I ran into a colleague I haven't seen in years. She said, I never know whether I will have a job from one day to the next. A friend in the UK says, I'm just keeping my nose clean. I can't afford to lose my job right now. Another friend, it's not great at work, but I need the salary. Go one level deeper, and for some, we may be witnessing a systemic shift from agency-driven workforce to a fear-regulated one. The great stay may not be about loyalty or recovery at all, but about shrinking perceived futures, declining psychological safety, and a loss of belief in upward mobility. On the surface, it looks like stability. At the human level, it might be a slow contraction of possibility. On the other end of the scale, for others, we may be witnessing the early formation of a new work mindset, one that values adaptability over speed, capability over titles, and sustainability over constant progression. The great stay, seen through this lens, could be about people slowing down long enough to build the capacity required for the next phase of work. On the surface, it looks like people are standing still. At a deeper level, many may be preparing for a more conscious, more human future of work. Let's push this forward. Factors like economic performance and even the impact of AI is hard to predict, but there are factors that we can control. The first is human capability and adaptability. In the next decade, the human capacity to adapt could become the new job security. Human capability and adaptability means improving our skills and learning velocity, boosting our self-confidence and psychological resilience in uncertainty. When we have the knowledge and the confidence, we can engage with the new world. In this approach, human-AI collaboration literacy is a key skill. Not just knowing how to use AI, but how to redesign your own work alongside it and because of it. Doing so means AI isn't just increasing output expectations, it restores time and autonomy. Other critical skills identified by the World Economic Forum and the OECD include meta skills like adaptability, problem solving, and social and emotional skills, all critical as the world of work continues to evolve. The second factor, intentional organizational design. Some organizations design for trust, safety, mobility, and human-first energy. In these environments, information tends to flow more openly. Decision-making is more distributed, and mistakes are treated as part of learning. Others are built on surveillance, compliance, hierarchy, and fear-based productivity. Here, information is tightly controlled, authority is concentrated, and uncertainty is managed through pressure rather than participation. From the outside, both may appear stable. From the inside, they produce very different human experiences. In the first, people tend to stay by choice. In the second, they tend to stay by fear. Over time, those two forces compound in very different ways. One builds capability, resilience, and innovation, while the other erodes energy, trust, and the capacity to adapt. Let's go futuring and imagine 3 possible futures for the next decade. Future 1, the capable human-designed system. By the early 2030s, a clear shift has taken place. The ability to adapt, not a contract, has become real job security. People keep learning as part of everyday work, not only after hours. Humans and AI work side by side, with people staying firmly in charge of how AI is used. Organizations are reshaped around trust, psychological safety, open communication, internal movement, and protecting human energy. Repetitive and low-value work is mostly automated, while people focus on judgment, creativity, problem-solving, and relationships. Humans, not algorithms, decide why the work exists and what really matters. As a result, time is better balanced, workdays are shorter, and engagement grows. Because both human capability and organizational design are aligned, the economy continues to grow without burning people out. With more mental and social capacity available, societies respond better to big challenges like climate change, healthcare, and long-term planning. People stay because the work is meaningful and supports how they want to live. The great stay gives way to the great becoming. Future 2, the algorithmic boss. In this future, AI becomes the manager, the scheduler, the evaluator, and the decision maker. Humans are optimized rather than supported. Every movement's measured. Every output is ranked. Work is adjusted continuously in real time. At first, efficiency explodes, costs fall, shareholder value surges. But then the longer arc sets in. Inequality hardens, jobs disappear, growth slows, instability becomes permanent. The algorithm gains a precise understanding of how humans work and how to influence behavior at scale. It learns how to trigger compliance, dampen dissent, regulate fear, and reward obedience with exactness. Psychological safety fades as vulnerability is penalized rather than protected. People stop leaving jobs because there are very few real alternatives. And when opportunities do appear, they sit inside the same invisible logic and the same silent pressure. The great stay settles in. It stops being a moment in time and becomes a long condition. And the future continues to narrow. Future 3, the fractured workforce. By the early 2030s, a new form of inequality has taken hold, not based on education alone, but on adaptability and learning velocity. A growing class of highly capable individuals no longer works for a single employer. They sell their expertise across multiple organizations, industries, and even countries. They move fluidly between projects, advising, building, solving, and then moving on again. They trade stability for autonomy and do so from a position of strength. At the same time, a much larger group remains locked inside traditional employment structures. They lack mobility, confidence to reskill, and access to meaningful options. They experience the worst version of the great stay. Long tenure without growth, security without agency. Work splits into two worlds, one defined by optionality and self-directed freedom, the other by containment and limited future. Inequality is still about income, but also about who has the ability to move and work and who does not. When we bring this back to South Africa, the picture becomes even more complex. Unlike the global north, we've lived with high unemployment, economic pressure, and job insecurity for decades. So in many ways, the great stay is not new here at all. Yet if I look back to how my working life began, paper, fax machines, slow systems, and add to that the big events, the 2008 crash, COVID, and recent geopolitical upheavals, we do follow the bigger trends too. And now new global forces like AI, climate pressure, and geopolitical shocks are colliding with our existing challenges. This creates a real risk of a two-speed workforce, a small, highly adaptable group with growing options, and a much larger group experiencing a permanent version of the great stay. At the same time, South Africa also has something powerful, a young population, entrepreneurial energy, and a strong informal and small business sector. What happens next could depend on the extent to which we can turn capability building, education, and human-centered organizational design into national priorities, or whether fear and stagnation becomes the dominant forces shaping work here. This is where we are. We've spoken about the trends that shaped the last few years and how we landed in what many now call the great stay. We've also imagined how that same moment could move in very different directions. The truth is there are many possible futures ahead. My thoughts are shared to spark further thinking, not to predict. What will likely shape the future most are the everyday choices we make about how we grow our skills, how organizations treat people, and how we respond to the wider pressures of the world around us. The future of work isn't fixed. It's very much in motion. Let's bring this home with a few practical takeaways. For individuals, 1. Ask yourself honestly, am I staying by choice or by fear? 2. Build real options, skills, networks, financial buffers. 3. Separate identity from employment. Your job is something you do, not who you are. 4. Learn to work with uncertainty rather than medicating it with security. For leaders, 1. Low resignations are not proof of engagement. Silence is not loyalty. 2. Psychological safety is becoming a strategic asset. 3. Use AI to remove friction, not to intensify pressure. 4. Design internal mobility for high talent so that movement feels safer inside than outside. For organizations, treat the last 5 years as a rehearsal for deeper disruption ahead. Invest in capability, not just performance. I want to repeat that. Invest in capability, not just performance. 3. Replace fear-based retention with agency-based commitment. 4. Measure what keeps humans strong: learning, energy, trust, meaning, health. The Great Resignation asked whether people were brave enough to leave broken systems. The Great Stay is asking whether we are brave enough to design better systems for people even when uncertainty is high. If people stay only because they are afraid to move, we will get very stable organizations and very small futures. But if people stay because they are learning, growing, and trusted, then the great stay becomes the great becoming. And that future must be consciously designed. Thanks for listening. Happy futuring.